Okay, so this is a GUI development question, just a simple program we need. We need to write a Java program using a GUI that contains a text area and a command button titled display. When a display button is clicked, the program has to read data from an existing data file named staffphone and display all the data in a text area. The data in the file has the following format, so that's the format of the data there. It's got comma separated data, so a name, comma, phone number. Okay, so just two types of data, name and phone number, and multiple records of data, so multiple staff. In addition to the data, the text area has to display the total number of phone entries at the end. Okay, so we're going to read the file and display the number of entries. That's basically what it comes down to. So I'm going to follow 4 steps here. I'm going to do a storyboard. I'm going to build the GUI. Step 3 is going to be reading the file and displaying it in the text area. And step 4, I'm going to talk about some tweaks and improvements we could do to make our program better and reusable, more reusable. Okay, so that's the plan of attack. We're going to start with a storyboard first. Okay, so here I've loaded up the PowerPoint, and it's not bad for drawing storyboards and things. If you want to use a piece of paper, that's fine as well, or draw it on a whiteboard, or whatever works good for you. So I'm going to draw my window, and then a text area in there somewhere, and then all we need is a display button. Format. No filler. I'll do a black line. Okay, so there's a display button there, and maybe in the middle, something like that. So that's basically what we want to look at. So we're going to have a frame and a text area in the middle somewhere and a display button. That's all we need. Okay, so let's start. So we'll build the GUI first of all. We've done the storyboard, we'll build the GUI. Oh, and let's just talk about things too with the GUI. So this is a great example of a border layout. So we've got a big central area where the text area is going to go. So we'll have a border layout and at the text area to the center. And then at the bottom here, we've got a southern area. So we'll add that to a border layout southern. And set the button's not huge all the way across the screen. We'll add the display button to a flow panel, a panel with flow layout, and then we'll add the flow layout panel to the southern area of a border. Okay, so let's resume. So first thing we're going to do is public class, and it's got to be the same name as my file. I've called it StaffPhoneGUI. Okay, that's my class. We're building a windowed application, so we'll go extends JFrame so that we get a frame to which we can add our GUI components. Okay, that's our class. One thing I like doing as well when I'm coding, as well as lining up the opening and closing braces, I like putting a comment on the closing brace, especially when it's a fair distance away from the opening brace, just to make it really clear what it belongs to. So we'll need a main method, public static void main. That's going to kick off our GUI. Okay, and we'll need a constructor, and it's going to have the same name as our class and no data type, so it's just public followed by the class name followed by round brackets. That's our constructor. Okay, so we're just putting a bit of a template in at the moment. So we need a text area, so J text area equals new J text area. Okay, so we'll create our text area. We'll also create a button, J button, display. Okay, and we'll give it a label of display. So we can do that right there. Just put a display string inside quotes there. Oops. I'll just turn off word wrap so that we don't keep fighting with the word wrapping. I'm only working in a small window. Okay, so that's our GUI components. We need some imports. And I'm just going to keep things simple for the purpose of the video. I like naming all the inputs individually, but I'll use asterisk because we want to keep it short. Java x.swing.star. Okay, so I'm just bringing in all of the swing components, which includes JFrame, JTextArea, JButton, and so on. Okay, so let's now add our GUI components to our user interface, and we'll have the text area to We'll add it to the center region of our border layout. Okay. Now, when you build an application that extends JFrame, the layout is automatically border layout. So you don't need to go in here. You don't need to say set layout to border layout. You don't need to do that because it's just border layout by default. Okay. So we can just add the text area to the central region of a border layout for our current user interface. So that's adding it to our frame because we're just adding it to whatever this is here that's being extended. So our class is extending JFrame. So this add method here actually adds it to our JFrame. Okay, and if we just go ahead and add the display button, I'll show you what happens. And it's border layout south. Okay, and we just need a little bit of plumbing to make our application run. Whoops. We need to declare an instance of our object in our main method. So we're declaring a StaffPhoneGUI object, and we're saying equals new StaffPhoneGUI. So we're calling our constructor that equals new, calls our constructor. So this code here will run inside the constructor automatically. Okay. By default in Java, everything's invisible, so need to make our application visible. Set visible to true. Next, we need to set the size of our application's window. So that's with the set size method, and we specify the number of pixels wide. 500 sounds fair enough. We can give it a try. 400 high. We can always change it later. So that's setting the size of our window. And the last thing we need to do is set the default close operation. And this is the operation that happens when the user clicks the little X icon in the top right hand corner of the frame. And what we do there is we go JFrame dot, and we use a constant built into the JFrame class, exit on close, and that should be pretty close. Okay, so we're setting a default close operation, setting the size, setting the frame to visible, and declaring a GUI object there based on our class. That should be it. We need some imports. So we import javax.swing.star, and we also need to do an import for AWT, import java awt.star, because border layout is part of the AWT class. Okay, so if we do a compile there, control 1, everything's compiled nicely. Control 2, we can run it. And there's our little application running. There's a great big text area. Okay, and the display button takes all the bottom row. Okay, so we might just fix that before we go on. We'll just fix that display button so it's nicely sized rather than hogging the whole bottom row there. And we'll do that next. So what we need is a panel or a J panel, flow panel. We can call it whatever we like. I've called it flow panel equals new J panel, and we'll say new flow layout. And how do we want the flow layout to go? Well, we want this one to be centered, so the buttons are centered. Flow layout.center. Close round bracket, semicolon. That should be pretty close. Okay, now what we want to do is add the display button to the flow panel. So flow panel.add display button. And then we'll add the flow panel to the southern region of the border layout. So the idea here is that we add the button to the panel, and then the panel to the border layout south, and the flow panel expands to fill up the whole region, but the button doesn't change. It just stays a nice normal size. So that's the way you do it. You just declare a panel, add the object to the panel or the objects to the panel, and then add the panel to the user interface somewhere. And that way the panel expands, but the buttons and components in there don't expand as well. So they're all nicely sized. Control 1, Control 2, and there you'll see we've got a nice little button. Nothing happens yet. We'll add that in next. Okay, so let's just make it so our button displays something. So we'll add a method called private void add test data. Just a little bit of a test data going into our text area. And so it's text area, oops, text area dot set text. So you set the text of a text area. So we'll add a bit of text there. Hello world. Okay, so just setting a text there, hello world, a couple of blank lines, and a message saying the display button is working. Okay, just so we can see something in the text area. So we want to now wire up that button to the display button so that it runs this code whenever the display button is clicked. And the way you do that is you go display button.add action listener, and we're going to use lambdas because that's a nice little shortcut, and it's just event followed by the method name. So we're using lambdas here, which is an advanced technique, but it's so much simpler than the old way of doing it. Okay, so just looking at that again, display button.add action listener, open round brackets, event hyphen greater than, and then the method you want to run, and then close round brackets, semicolon. Okay, so that's a nice little shortcut. And what happens now is when we click the display button, the add text area button will run. Oh, and there's one final thing that we need. We need to tell Java, or we need to bring in the libraries or classes that deal with action listeners and action events. So that's just an import we need to do as well, and it's import java.awt.event.star. Oops, that should be an AWT. Okay, so we've got 3 imports there, bringing in the swing libraries, the AWT libraries, and the event stuff that's part of AWT. And that should be it. Control 1, Control 2. Okay, there's our program, and if we click the display button, we get our little message come out in the text area. Okay, so let's just review where we are. We need to write a GUI program that contains a text area and a command button called display. So we've done that. We can tick that off. When the display button is clicked, the program has to read data from an existing data file named staffphone.txt and display the data in the text area. Okay, and also the number of records that we've read in, or the number of staff phone entries. Okay, so that's some little bits we need to do now. So we've done step 1, we've done step 2. Now we need to work on reading the file and displaying it in a text area. Okay, so now let's read the file. We're up to step 3 now. Let's read the file. Many ways you can do this in Java, many ways. I'll just show you one way. I'll show you probably the simplest way, but there's many other ways as well. So, and we might as well do it in a method, so we keep everything nice and self-contained. Reading a file is something you probably want to do often. In other courses, in other assignments, and other Duke questions. So we'll make it a method so you can reuse it. Private void read file. And I might even make it so it returns a string. Okay, so we'll make it so the read file method returns a string, and we'll pass in a file name. And that's pretty well all we need. Okay, now when you start dealing with file operations, they can raise exceptions. So we need to handle those exceptions somewhere. So we might as well just do it in here. We'll do try, and we'll put all the code that might raise an exception in here, and then we'll do a catch. And we might catch various things there, and we'll handle the exceptions. Okay, and we'll probably end up having multiple catch statements. Maybe not, maybe we will. I think for this simple example, we'll just keep it simple. Okay, so many ways you can read a file. One of them is to use file reader, which is a class in Java. And to the file reader, you pass in your file name. Okay, and I'll just make it so it's no word wrapping again. So file reader equals new file reader and the file name that we've passed in. So that's just getting used there. Okay, and we want to wrap that in a scanner object. So scanner, good old scanner that we've been using a lot. In file equals new scanner. And inside round brackets here, we put our file reader. So we're like declaring a file reader object and then using scanner to process that file. Okay, and by doing that we can use scanners methods like next line, next word, next int, next double, and so on. So by doing that we get access to all scanners methods that make file reading so much easier. Okay, so we need a while loop now. So while in file dot has next. In other words, while there's more data in the file. we want to read in the data. Okay, now where are we going to put the data? This method's returning a string. Maybe instead of a string we could return other things, but we're not dealing anything with the data for now, so we'll just make it a string that we're returning. Yeah, so string file data str file data str. Just make it that. Okay, and then inside here I'll go file data equals file data plus our next line from our file dot next line plus /n, and I'll bring all that down onto another line so you can see it a bit clearer. Okay, so I'm just saying every time through the loop we're going to add the next line from the file plus a new line, so, and add that onto our file data string. Okay, and that's pretty close to being it. The last thing we need to do, well, one of the last things we need to do is do some cleaning up. So we've got to close our files, otherwise things can become corrupt or files can be left open and locked. Nasty things can happen. So in file.close. Okay, and the other thing we need to do is close our file reader object. So just call close for both of those. Okay, so just to recap, we've got a file reader object which is taking our name of our file that we've passed the method. We're wrapping that file reader object in a scanner object, and that gives us access to all scanners' beautiful methods that make file reading and input processing so much easier. And while in file.hasNext, so while there's more data in the file, get the next line of data from the file, tack on a /n, and append it to the file data string that we're building up. So at the end of reading that file, file data string will contain all of the data in the file. Okay, and then here we also need to display the number of records read from the file. So we might as well make this method not quite as reusable as we'd like, because we've got to display the number of records and keep track of the number of records, and I don't want to complicate things too much. So what we can do in here is set the text of our text area, text area.setText, file data string. Okay, so whatever's in the file is now going to be in the file in the text area, and we could also do before we do that, we could tack on a number of records that are read in. Okay, so we'll declare an integer, num records. Okay, so number records equals 0. Every time through the loop, we'll add 1 onto that. Okay, so number records plus plus just adds 1 onto number of records, and then we can include that in our file data string now. Okay, so after we've finished our loop, we can now add on the number of records read with the number of records to our file data string, and probably put a /n at the end as well, just to finish off nicely. /n, and then we're setting the text of our text area to that file data string. Now the thing we're going to do now is this nasty business down here. Okay, now a whole lot of exceptions could be raised by this code. There could be file not found exception, no such element exception, IO exception, and various others. And we could have a catch statement to handle each one and different error messages going on. I'm just going to catch the top level exception class for now, just to try and keep it simple for these exercises. Okay, and what do we want to do when, let's call it error, ERR. What do we want to happen when an error occurs? Well, we want to set text to the text area. Maybe we want to display a dialog as well. I'll just say error file issues for now. Okay, but you could display a nice meaningful error message instead of that. Okay, so we're nearly ready to compile. Again, we need some imports. java.io.star to bring in file reader and its friends, and we need our scanner, which is import java.util.scanner. Okay, and there's one other thing I just remember we need to do as well, and that's down here. Our method's returning a string, which I was going to go that way where we return a string from the method, but when we needed to display the number of records and all sorts of things in our file data, I've decided against it for now. So for now, we could either make it so it's a void method or just return an empty string. I think I'll make it a void method. That's probably... Okay, so read file just reads in the file and displays the data with the number of records read in the text area. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, so control 1, control 2, and display. Oh, we haven't wired up our new code yet. Okay, so instead of display button calling the add text data or test data, it should be, we'll make it so it displays or reads the file. So read file, and it's going to be called staffphone.txt. So we're calling the read file method and passing in the staffphone.txt file as a name. Control 1, control 2, display, and we've got error. There's file issues, and the reason for that is our file doesn't yet exist. I haven't created a file. So again, there's various ways we could handle that, but just to try and keep things simple for now, I'll just go and create a little text file in our work directory there. So I'm now working in here, and my menu's hidden. Sorry, I've got a little tiny window working in it here to keep the video size down. Staffphone.txt. So at least we've got a file now. It's going to be empty. There's nothing in it, but at least we've got a file to read. Okay, so now when we run our program, control 1, control 2 to run. Now we run our program, it says 0 records read. So at least we know the program's working properly there. Let's put some data in it. And we've got some data there at the top of our program. We'll just put that data straight in our file. So we've got 3 records in our file. I've just edited the staffphone.txt file. Okay, control 1, control 2, click the display button. And now we've got the data read in, and we've got the 3 records read there. Might be a good idea to space that out a bit more. So we'll do that as well. Plus /n, leave a bit of a gap, and then display the number of records read. And a plus. Control 2, display, and there's our program running. 3 records read and 3 records read are displayed. Okay, so that's pretty well it for step 3. So we read the file and displayed it in the text area. It's a little bit hacky at the moment. We could make lots of improvements and tweaks, and that's what we'll look at next. So we're coming up with tweaks and improvements. Okay, so the tweaks I want to look at for now anyway is I want to read the data properly from the file. If you just read all the data as one big string of data, you can't really do much with it. You can't process it. You can't generate the list of names in the file. You can't work out how many phone numbers start with 07. All that sort of stuff's messy. So it's much better to read the data in and separate into its component parts like name and phone number and so on. So we'll look at doing that, and we'll create a staff class so that we can store our staff data properly. And so because we've got so much data, or we might have a lot of data coming in, we'll use an array or an array list, and I'll probably just go with an array list. They're so great, and once you've done a few things with array lists, you'll hopefully enjoy working with them. They're very powerful, very good. So we'll look at reading the data in properly, creating a staff class, and have an array list of that staff class. Okay, so let's create the staff class first of all. I want to keep everything all in one file, but the ideal way would be to separate all your classes out into separate files. But I want to have a class here called staff, and I'm not making it public. In Java, you can only have one public class per file. So I'm adding this class here into our same class file as our StaffPhoneGUI, just to keep it simple for this video. Okay, but normally we'd put all that staff class into its own file and make it public class staff. Okay, so it'd be a public class inside its own file. I'm just keeping it short and sweet for now and inside the one file. Private data, we've got a string called name, and we might as well just have another string called phone number. We don't know if there's going to be formatting characters and things in phone numbers, so it's just easy sometimes to make them like that. So a string. Okay, we want a constructor, staff, that's public. We want to bring in a name, and you've done this many times already, I'm sure. Every term there's many examples like this where you create a constructor and pass in the data, and you say name equals name, and you put a this in front to mean the class one. This.name means the class one, in other words that one, and name on its own means the one you've passed in other words that one. Same for phone. Okay, so there's our constructor. It's that easy. We're not going to worry about doing validation. We're just keeping it simple. And maybe we want to our get methods and our set methods. Okay, so there's a get name. Same for get phone. And ideally as well, we would be doing the same thing for sets, so set name and set phone. I'm not going to worry about it for this little example. We'll just stick with the gets now. We've got the constructor to set data when we need to. Okay, I've got a frog outside there that's making a noise. Okay, so that's our staff class. We need an array list where we're going to store our data. So we'll come in here and we go private array list. And we need to tell Java what type of data we're storing in our array list. So it's staff data, in other words, our staff class data. New array list. I'll just scroll over slowly. New array list staff, round brackets, semicolon. And that's it, we've declared our array list. So now we've got an array list of staff where we can store our staff records. Okay. So let's go down to our read. Method down here. Again, we're probably going to lose because we're now making this reads in a certain type of data. We're going to lose our generality. So it's going to become more a specific method, but that's okay. We can live with that. So staff array list. The first thing we want to do is erase our array list, just in case there's data in it already from the previous reads. So staff array list.clear. One thing is what I'd like to show you is a thing called tokens. They're very useful, very powerful. And so what you do is you declare a string and maybe call it whatever you like, parts or tokens or whatever you like. And what we're going to do there is get the next line of data from the file and do a split on it. I'm going to split it by comma. And I think it's comma space in the file, so comma space. Okay, so what parts now contains? Parts now contains all of the data from the next line split by comma. Okay, so part 0, because it's an array, part 0 would be the name, and part 1 would be the phone number. Okay, so we can use that now to create a staff member. So parts 0 is the name, and parts 1 is the phone number. So we're just passing through the name and the phone number to our staff class constructor. Probably before we do that, we just want to make sure that the size of the array is really 2. Just so we're not getting shortchanged and we're all running out of data. L-E-N-G-G-H. I'll spell it eventually. So parts length is equal to 2. then we can safely create our staff member. Else, and I'll put some curly brackets in here because we're going to have a few more lines of code. I'm thinking on the fly here, so that's all okay. So if there is an error in here, we can throw new, and we'll just create our exceptions. So throw new IO exception. In other words, raise an exception. Something's wrong with our file. We don't have a name and a phone number, so our data file's bad. And so just throw an exception. So if parts length equals 2, we can do it. Otherwise, we're going to throw an exception. So now we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing the... Okay, but we're still counting the number of records. Okay, so another thing we need to do, of course, is add our... Look at that array list. So I'll just go up, scroll up and grab that array list name, staff array list. We need to add our data into our array list. So that staff object we just created, we need to add it to our array list, which is an array list of staff objects. Okay, and that's that easy. Okay, so when we get down here now, we need to get the data out of the array list and put it into the text area, okay, which we can do. I might do it a slightly different way. I might use the append method. So up here we might do a set text to nothing to erase our text area, and then I'm going to loop through dot size. Okay, so k equals 0, k is less than staff array list dot size, k plus plus. So we're looping through all staff records in the array list. And what we're going to do is we're going to append. We're going to append okay, so we're going to get the current staff member 0, 1, 2 and so on. Okay, and then we're going to get their name. So that gives that staff member. Okay, but we're going to get their name, so we're calling the getName method. Okay, and then plus a tab, and plus, and now we can get their phone number. So it's the same sort of code, but get phone. Okay, so just to review that loop, setting the text area to blank, text area.append, staff ArrayList.getK to get the current staff member. We're looping through all staff members. .getName to get their name. Add a tab on, the tab character to leave a bit of space. Staff ArrayList.getK to get the current staff member. And .getPhone to get their phone. And one other thing we need to add is a /n, just to separate each row of the text area. Okay, and that should be it. And the other thing we want to do is append on the number of records. Okay, so text area.append, /n to leave a bit of space, number of records read. And we'll do that. Oh, we must leave the /n there. Just put the round bracket there at the end. Okay, because we're inside the append method call. And that should be it. Okay, so let's just review our code quickly. So we've got a staff class built inside our other class, or it's built in the same file, so it's just haven't got public in front, we can't do that. We've got a staff constructor, a getName and a getPhone method. We could also add setName and setPhone. We could also add validation. There's a whole lot of things we could add. We're just trying to keep it simple. We've got an array list being declared here called staff array list, which is of type staff. So we're going to store all this staff data inside an array list. Down here in the read file method, we're clearing the array list. And when we read the data in from file, we're splitting up each row by comma. All the data's comma separated, so we've got name, comma, phone number, comma. There might be more data later. For now, it's just two bits of data. So if parts.length is equal to 2, we've got 2 bits of data. The first one's name, and the second one's the phone number. So we're just passing those through to the staff constructor. Adding that new staff member we just created there to our array list. Okay, so at the end of this closing brace here, we've read all the data from the file and they're all in the array list. Now it's time to add the data in the array list into our text area. Okay, and the reason why I've stored it in the array list, we might want to do searching or sorting or all sorts of things later on. And if it's in the array list, we can do the searching and sorting in the array list and then display it again whenever we want. Okay, so that's why I've done it that way. So set text to blank to erase the array list, and then text area.append. Loop through all staff members in the array list. .get k to get the current one. Get name to get its name. Get k to get the current one. Get phone to get the staff's phone number. Put a tab between the columns and a /n at the end of the line for leaving a blank line or going down to the next line. And then right at the end of that loop, we're doing an append /n with the number of records read. And we don't need to do that set text anymore. We've now done it all via appends, which is a little bit neater. Okay, one thing we do need is our imports for ArrayList. java.util.ArrayList. That brings in our ArrayList class, which is very useful, and we should be good to go now. Control 1, Control 2, and we can do a display. And you'll see now the data's tab separated, so there's no longer that comma there. So now if we need to do a search on staff members or a search through phone numbers or sorting on any columns, we can do that really easily because all of our data is stored properly in an array list. Okay, so that's a big improvement. So let's look at our little roadmap there again. We're reading the data properly, we've got a staff class, and we've got an array list. So there's plenty of other improvements we could do. We could add validation in, other things as well we could add in, but that's pretty good for now. So we've answered the question and gone a little bit further by using an array list of a class. So I hope that was useful. Thanks for watching, and make sure you try it on yourself on your own. So make sure you follow through this code on your own as well and duplicate it on your own, and you'll understand things much better. Okay, thanks for watching.